Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Tuesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 8th of August. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by going to weather.gov/Alaska or calling us on the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. As always, if you can't find what you're looking for, you need a little help finding that special product, or perhaps an observation is something that you're looking for and you can't seem to figure out just what button to click, please let me know. david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy to help you out anytime I can. Here's a look at what's going on across the region. This afternoon around Tetland Road, we're still under a flood advisory there for the foreseeable future there until the water goes down. But probably for more people, the interesting thing will be the Siberian cold front, the first really decent one of the season, coming ashore as we head into late Thursday, even starting tomorrow night. You'll see some of the winds picking up. But as we head into Thursday, Friday, and probably into the weekend, a pretty decent push of northerly winds will be affecting the Chukchi coast as well as northern parts of the Seward Peninsula. And that could mean high surf and certainly some high seas, at least for a time being. There's going to be some gusty winds with that, and there's also going to be a chance for snow across the Brooks Range, and those north winds will signal a change for many across the western coasts and the Aleutians as we go further out into the weekend. It's also going to squeeze out quite a bit of rain across south central Alaska and change the weather up for us. Now, we're not talking about any sizable cold outbreak for any location, but again, at elevation across the Dalton Highway, there could be some impacts for travelers going up and down the road there. So just time to start paying attention to the weather a little bit. And if you're heading north or planning to come south, watch the weather as we go toward the end of the week here. And, you know, if you're not ready to drive on just a little bit of snow, you might want to consider your plans, at least for a moment or two. So stay abreast of the weather and the changes that are coming our way, and especially if you're on the Chukchi Seacoast and into the Kotzebue Sound region, and perhaps even in the Norton Sound. Should the track change just a little bit, this could impact your community and perhaps your plans along the coast. So again, stay advised of what's going on across the region. Now, as the fire danger goes here, we're pretty close to the end of the season if we're not already there yet. But we are still seeing some higher or elevated levels of fire danger across the upper Yukon Valley and the flats, across the western Tanana Valley there, and then across the upper Tanana Valley, not too far away from Tetland Road despite the flooding there along the region, and then across the Copper River Valley, and generally from Delta Junction and then southward into perhaps the McCarthy area north of Valdez and the coastal range there. So still some drier conditions, but a lot of this will change in the next 5 to 7 days simply because of that push of cool air coming in from the north and the wet air that's meeting up with it across south central and moving into the interior as we go throughout the week. Here's a look at the visible satellite picture now, and you can see that southeast has had a pretty fine day from tip to tail, it looks like, for most of the region, all the way into Prince William Sound. Generally drier conditions for you and warm weather as well. The central and eastern interior, generally the southern half of that anyway, has been fairly mild, and warm weather continues there. And every one of these popcorn type clouds that you see across the Yukon Flats out toward British Columbia and the Northwest Territories, most of that has been showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. Across the west, you can see how cloud cover has been breaking up a little bit, but the push has been from the south and east, and that's the warm and wet air leading up into the southwestern coast and into Norton Sound there. And not much of a signal yet on the satellite picture that we can see here, but let's take a look at the infrared picture. And there you have it, that north and westerly flow coming in from the north and west anyway, moving south and east toward the coast, is one of the first preliminary waves that's moving toward the northwest coast tonight. There's going to be several waves of that. One of those has made its way up to around Barrow so far today. Not a really sizable front in its strength or temperature change, but as we look out in the surface maps here in a moment, you'll see them lining up, and the one that's coming in later in the week has got a little bit more oomph to it, and that's the one that will bring more of a change for many across central and southwestern and western Alaska as we get toward Thursday night, and into Friday, and eventually wet weather down south. That will eventually push more clouds into southeast as well. So changes are coming, and you know, the Arctic's kind of cracking its knuckles just a little bit, saying, okay, I think we're ready to go here. You know, it's not winter time yet, but thinking about it, right? Low pressure's up around Barrow this afternoon. You've got high pressure around St. Lawrence Island at 1,018 millibars, and a stronger area of high pressure here across the Gulf. It's got a lot of cloud cover trapped underneath it, but this has been promoting that warm, summer-like feel late in the summer across south central and many into the interior for sure, and southeast enjoying a fine weather day. There's some sunshine for you late in the season. Light rain around Bristol Bay, low pressure out across the Aleutians. This has been trapping fog across the Bering. No surprise there for the summer months. And a few showers and thunderstorms across the upper Yukon Valley and the Yukon Flats into western Canada. Here's the first wave. Tonight you can see the front moving into the Chukchi coast. Areas of showers out ahead of that, and probably a little bit of fog up around the coast as well as that moves in. That's at 981 millibars. The low is really far away from the coast. However, that should start to push some slightly higher waves closer to the Chukchi coast. So pay attention to that, especially if you have plans to go fish. High pressure sitting across the northern Bering at 1,016 millibars will stay in place for now. And a weak low pressure system across the Alaska Peninsula at 1,003 millibars will start to move some light rain a little bit further up the Yukon and Kuskokwim coastline and up into the upper Kuskokwim Valley itself toward McGrath. Showers across the western Alaska Range are expected tonight. You'll probably see rain in Seward and Homer. And our high pressure system across the central and eastern Gulf stays put. That means weather should be fairly tame and quiet and dry for most in southeast. As we get into Wednesday, low pressure swings out into the eastern sections of the Brooks Range at 1,007 millibars. Again, this isn't the big front, but this is just the first part of it. Areas of light rain should be expected across most of the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seacoast as high pressure quickly takes its place just north of the Bering Sea, or Bering Strait, 1,018 millibars there. That'll push in more of a north and northwesterly flow, an onshore flow for sure. So it will be cooler, it will be cloudier, and it will likely be wetter for just about everybody on the north side. Low pressure outside of Bristol Bay will keep some light onshore flow moving through Kodiak Island. The winds don't look terribly strong, but it does look like you're going to get wet again, with rain moving all the way up the southwestern coast and over a large part of south central and the Kenai Peninsula. Notice southeast, you're still sitting in the clear for Wednesday with high pressure at 1,025 millibars. A lot of fog out across the Bering, another wave of low pressure just south of the chain. As we get into Thursday, that's when we start to see the much colder air dropping southward. And for now, we don't have snow across the forecast for the Brooks Range for Thursday, but I think as you get into Friday and probably Saturday, we're going to need to paint some snow across the higher terrain here. So we'll keep an eye on that as changes will be happening as we get a better idea about just what kind of track this low pressure system is going to have. And we start getting a taste with our weather models about how cold this air is. Once we can put all those things together there, the picture will become a little more clear for travelers along the Dalton Highway and those in Kotzebue Sound, as well as the Chukchi Coast, with the waves and the higher surf being a consideration in your plans there. So we're watching that and keeping track of it, and we'll let you know as soon as we see some changes there. Across most of the Yukon Valley, periods of light rain should be expected. The Susitna Valley, as well as areas toward the Matanuska and eastward, will be looking at light rain on and off through Thursday, the heaviest of which probably comes in during the mid-afternoon hours for south central and into southwest. High pressure still in charge of the eastern Gulf, but you can see it's losing ground fairly quickly, so those in southeast will likely see more clouds as we get into Thursday. High pressure is in charge of the western Bering at 1,021 millibars. Areas of fog and drizzle will still stick around for the Pribilovs and parts of Nunivak Island and onto the Yukon and Norton Sound coastline there. But you can see that is shifting eastward as well. Something to keep watch on that could change that up would be low pressure across the North Pacific and just south of the chain. We'll see where this ends up as we get into Friday and Saturday, but it could reinvigorate that wet flow into the Gulf as a cold front is dropping southward, giving a better chance for some rainfall to continue into the weekend across south central. So a lot to watch and a lot of changes coming our way, but the big player that we'll be keeping most of our attention on will be that Siberian cold front coming in toward the end of the week. Here's a look at temperatures today. Way ahead of any winter talk is the warmth that remains across southeast. Look at these temps today. Mid to upper 60s, even mid to upper 70s for some. Hyder made it to 77, 70 in Sitka, and 50s and 60s around Juneau. Some areas probably tapped the 70-degree mark. 66 in Yakutat, 50s and 60s for Prince William Sound, Anchorage was well into the 70s today, 68 in Kenai, 64 for Homer, and low 70s at least for most on the park's highway system. 71 in Fairbanks around Healy and the Denali National Park, McKinley Park area, 70 degrees by 3 o'clock, a very warm day. Nearly 80 around Eagle, 82 around Tok. And as you get up toward Fort Yukon, 75 degrees today. 67 for Arctic Village, 66 going over AKwx Pass, and 40s and 50s for the Beaufort Seacoast. Down the Chukchi Coast, temperatures were closer to 50 degrees from Barrow westward toward Point Hope and Point Lay. And mid-50s for the Kotzebue Sound region. Kotzebue itself, 55, 54 in Shishmaref, 60 degrees in Nome, Galena, and Ruby. Many up and down the Yukon River there in the lower 70s, 60s toward the coast, 57 around Nunivak Island, 66 for Bethel, and lower to mid-60s as you get into the Bristol Bay region. Lake Iliamna was in the upper 50s. 50s and 60s for the Alaska Peninsula and the chain, generally in the lower 50s today with St. Paul at 54. Overnight low temperatures will stay mild in the 40s and 50s for many. Some of the cooler readings up here across the Chukchi Coast back in the mid-40s around Wainwright, 47 in Kaktovik, South Central in the lower to mid-50s, 56 in Kodiak, and low to mid-50s for Southeast with St. Paul at 47 tonight and 51 in Nome. Expect a high of 60 as we get into your daytime highs tomorrow for Nome as you get into the middle Tanana Valley and upriver more. Upper 70s and even lower 80s once again in Eagle. But that is the warm before the storm. As cold air drops in from the north and west, you can see changes already occurring across the Chukchi Coast with highs dropping into the 50-degree range, even cooler there around Point Barrow and into Wainwright there. 60 around Nome. Looks like Bristol Bay back in the mid to upper 60s with most of the Alaska Peninsula in the upper 50s, 52 in St. Paul, and 70s at least for many across Southeast as you get another full day of sunshine, it looks like, for most in the Panhandle. Now on to flying weather. Expect changes across the northwest coast, obviously, with the front coming in. IFR conditions just grazing the Chukchi Coast. Areas around Kodiak Island and the north and western Gulf, as well as Bristol Bay, will be dealing with IFR through most of the morning. Watch for a few changes across South Central with MVFR conditions developing across the western Alaska Range, convection across the upper Tanana Valley, and IFR conditions from St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island through the Pribilofs and most of the Alaska Peninsula out toward Dutch Harbor and Unalaska for tomorrow afternoon. Here's your pass conditions. AKwx and Adigan Pass, we expect to see MVFR. We'll see that developing throughout the day across the western Alaska Range and creeping into Rainy Pass by the afternoon. Windy Pass and Isabel Pass all look to be VFR through your Wednesday. Antasta Pass, we expect to see visual flight rule there, and Tanita Pass too. Portage Pass, look for marginal conditions to develop in the afternoon, and Chilkoot and White Pass should have a fine flying day. Freezing levels are dropping. You can see that across the northwest coast. Levels as low as 6,000 feet as we get into tomorrow morning. We also have a cool pool of air across the western Gulf, but by and large, most of Alaska is still on the warm side, stretching between 8 and 14,000 feet for the morning freezing levels there. Icing potential will be a concern as well. As the front moves in, watch for these levels to start dropping more and more as we go through the remainder of the week. For tomorrow, there's enough moisture there that above 7 to about 10,000 feet or so, you may run into some areas of occasional moderate, but that should be pretty sparse and hit and miss, despite how I have it taking over a large part of the northwest coast. Also watch for some light to isolated moderate across southwestern Alaska, but as you see, that's pretty high up there, above 10, even 12,000 feet, so no major concerns right now. The jet stream has that powerful push of air coming in from the west and northwest. That'll help push a surface cold front toward Alaska as we get toward the end of the week. Low pressure just south of Kodiak Island, also spinning up some moisture into south central and western Alaska. Those winds there around 50 to 70 knots. At 9,000 feet, you can see our broad southerly flow keeping things stable and warm for most of southeast. The southerlies continue well into the interior, but here's our westerly push reaching the northwest coast, 15 to 25, and low pressure sitting just north of the Alaska Peninsula at 9 and 3,000 feet is keeping a southeasterly wind over the YK Delta. While high pressure across the northwest is pushing in that west and northwesterly wind. Winds are stronger at this level just off the coast, 30 to as strong as 40 knots at 3,000 feet. So we'll be watching for turbulence in this region below 4,000 feet, some of that reaching occasional moderate, and below 4,000 feet across southwestern Alaska, some chop around Kodiak Island and over the Barren Islands as we go through your day. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Craig Goodrich, Fire Marshal for the state of Alaska. I'd like to talk to you before we get started with the upcoming video to tell you that conditions are extremely dry right now in the state. There have been a number of forest fires so far. We want to avoid another disastrous year like we had in 1996 at the Miller's Reach fire. The video that is upcoming will have a variety of useful information, simple points that you can employ to help defend your home from the devastating effects of wildland forest fire. If at the end of this video you have questions, please feel free to contact your local fire department or the office of the State Fire Marshal.
I'm Jim Smalley of the National Fire Protection Association. As a homeowner living in areas where wildfires can occur, you can protect your home and preserve the environment around you by taking a few simple precautions.
First, before you buy land for a home, check with local officials to see what fire protection is available. Keep in mind that some areas are less naturally fire safe than others. For instance, during a fire, narrow canyons become natural chimneys, drawing in fire and accelerating its rate of spread. Locate your home on the most level portion. Fire spreads rapidly, even on minor slopes. If you're building a home on top of a ridge, it's also very important to build an adequate setback, at least 30 feet for a single-story home, to prevent the house from being hit directly by flames and heat moving up the sides of the ridge. Pre-construction planning shouldn't stop with the home itself. Consider that in the event of fire, firefighters need to be able to get to your site. You will need two-way roads with parking lanes to allow fire trucks and emergency vehicles plenty of room to get in and out. And since these vehicles may have difficulty climbing steep roads, build your road with a gradient of less than 12%. Any bridges leading to your home should also be wide enough and strong enough to support firefighting vehicles. A 40,000-pound minimum is recommended, but check with fire officials about local requirements. If your site has a cul-de-sac, make sure the radius is a minimum of 45 feet, wide enough for a fire truck to turn around without having to back up. A loop or U-shaped driveway provides plenty of access for firefighting equipment and an alternate escape route for you. Be sure to mark your location with a road name and house number clearly visible from the road so firefighters can find you.
Whether you're building a new home or retrofitting an existing one, you can work with building contractors, your architect, and fire protection agencies to create a design that's both aesthetically pleasing and fire safe.
There are many people in there that have bits and pieces of information that individually need to be brought together and produce a sort of an umbrella of information that would be available to the design professions. And that's not just architects, that's planners and landscape architects.
I think that many landscape architects, as well as other design professionals, are not aware of all of the do's and don'ts of protecting structures in life within the urban wildland interface.
The best thing is cooperation from the start. You know, it's iron out the problem areas, try to work out the problem areas, identify them, and then you know, work out solutions to those problems as soon as possible.
What we asked the developer to do is present a variety of opportunities that could be exploited through the project master plan that would be adopted through our process. The applicant came back with those suggestions. He, of course, consulted with the fire protection districts.
There are lots of situations in this particular part of the country where people have built into subdivisions that really didn't have adequate planning from a fire point of view. And so we have areas that we're very concerned about putting firemen into the area to save the houses. And we really feel that if we do have a fire in some particular areas, that we may just have to let the house go, because it would be a suicide mission to put our firemen in there to protect the houses. These are houses that don't have an adequate water system. They have long, narrow driveways. They have less than 30 feet clearance around the structure. They have shake roofs, road sides. They have big bay windows with nice trees growing up through the decks. And as far as we're concerned, these areas that we're actually going to have to write off. We will not be able to save these houses.
Fire officials say that non-treated wood shake roofs, which catch wind-blown sparks, are the #1 cause of home losses in wildland areas. So your roof should be made of non-combustible or fire-resistant materials. Some jurisdictions may allow the use of factory-treated wood shakes, but you should check this with your local authorities.
You may think that roof sprinklers could prevent a wood shake roof from burning, but they could provide only a false sense of security.
In the event of fire, you'd need large volumes of water to really make the roof safe, and water pressure is generally at its lowest during a fire. The electricity needed to pump the water may also fail during a fire crisis. Also, the high winds which often accompany wildland fires can divert the sprinkler spray from the roof. Like the roof, exterior walls should be made of fire-resistive materials from the ground to the roof line. It also helps immensely to keep flammable vegetation, wood piles, and debris away from the walls, but we'll talk more about that later. To ensure that you don't create your own spark hazard, screen your chimneys with non-combustible wire mesh screening. Also, cover your exterior attic and underfloor vents with wire mesh no larger than 1/2 inch to prevent sparks from being drawn in and catching fire. Sparks can melt through plastic or nylon screening. And if you're building a new home, locate your under-eave vents near the roof line rather than near the wall to prevent heat or flames from being entrapped. For the same reason, the eaves themselves should be boxed or designed with minimal overhang. You should also screen under your porch or any other areas below the ground line, again to keep out sparks and flames. Where windows are concerned, thick tempered safety glass is the safest choice, especially for picture windows and sliding glass doors. It may be possible to use double pane glass instead, but you should contact your local fire officials to see what's appropriate. Again, if you're building a new home, minimize the size and number of windows on the side of the house that would likely be exposed to a fire, the downhill side, or both. Also, windows should not face trees or shrubs that are closer than 30 feet away. On the outside, protect windows and sliding glass doors with non-flammable shutters, balconies, or decks. Fire-resistant drapes add extra protection inside.
Here's a look at today's Sea Ice Edge. You can always get more information at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. We're still working with somewhat low confidence right now for areas well north of the Beaufort Seacoast there for the pack ice with 80% or more concentration there. And somewhat modest confidence about the ice just north of Prudhoe Bay. Once we get a good look at that with satellite, that forecast will improve a little bit. But with winds changing and more of a north and westerly flow, a lot of this will still be on the move as we go through the coming days. So pay attention very closely to what's going on offshore. Here's a look at southeast. Light north and westerly winds coming down through the central and southern interchannels. Light southerlies for the Lynn Canal, 15 knots with a 3-foot sea. And light onshore flow coming into Cross Sound toward Gustavus, but south of Sitka, a stronger northwesterly wind, 20 knots with 3-foot seas there. Going into Thursday, that north and westerly flow starts to pick up a little bit more across the outer coast. 5 to 6-foot seas across the outside. On the inside, still looking at small seas, 2 to 3 feet with winds around 10 to 15 knots. For south central, easterlies inside of Prince William Sound looks like a nice day tomorrow, 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Watch for rain to develop though. Northeasterlies coming down Cook Inlet will start to pick up, but the strongest winds will be around the Barren Islands, 30 knots with 9 to 10-foot seas there and 25 knots on either side of Kodiak Island. A steady southeast flow at 25 knots should bring seas up to about 10 feet on the east side. For Thursday, winds should diminish and become variable with time. 2 to 3-foot seas from Cook Inlet southward toward Shelikof Strait and 5 to 6-foot seas across the western Gulf. You'll see a steady southerly flow coming into Prince William Sound. Easterlies pick up to 15 knots and southwesterlies across the northern Cook Inlet, 10 knots with 2-foot seas. Bristol Bay, you're looking at easterlies tomorrow, 20 knots, 4-foot seas. Northerlies coming into the southern end of the Alaska Peninsula on the Bering Sea coast, 5-foot seas there, and 6 to 7-foot seas across the Pacific with 25 knots feeding into Shelikof Strait and Castle Cape to Chignik. 15 knots from the south and east for Thursday across the same region, 6-foot seas down the Pacific coast, and 4-foot seas across the Bering Sea coast with easterlies continuing inside of Bristol Bay, 20 knots and 4-foot seas there. For the Aleutians, 15 to 20 knots in all areas, looking for a northwesterly flow for the eastern chain and a broad east to westerly flow for the central chain. 15 to 20 there with 5 to 6-foot seas on either side. By Thursday, a steadier northerly flow will pick up. You'll see more of a north and northwesterly flow for the central and eastern chain and a north and northeasterly flow from Atka westward toward Kiska and Attu with 25 knots out there, 6 to 7 foot seas for your Thursday. For the west coast, northwesterlies around St. Lawrence Island, northerlies from Nunivak Island to St. Matthew, and northeasterlies in the Kuskokwim Delta region, 20 knots with 4 foot seas. About the same there for St. Paul and St. George with more of a northerly push. As we get into Thursday, you'll see those northerlies picking up a little bit more, 10 to 20 knots. Look at the northwesterly flow out around St. Matthew. That's a sign of that colder air working its way southward into the Bering Sea. Easterlies continue around the Kuskokwim Delta, 20 knots with a 4 foot sea, and northerlies for St. Paul and St. George with 5 foot seas expected for your Thursday afternoon. Watch what happens up north now. The Chukchi coast, 15 to 20 knots, 6 to 8 foot seas are expected on Wednesday with a broad westerly flow for the Beaufort Sea coast, 20 knots and 4 to 5 foot seas, 8 foot seas around Barrow, and northwesterlies coming into Kotzebue Sound with 4 foot seas. By Thursday, a steady south and westerly flow picks up as the front moves ashore, but late in the day that front should start to approach the Chukchi coast and the winds will switch around, so be ready for a change. Westerlies across the Beaufort Sea coast, 15 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas, and 5 to 6 foot seas for the Chukchi coast again, as long as those winds are from the south and southwest. Once those northerlies pitch in, changes will be coming fairly quickly to your coastline. Tonight's forecast shows the first of several waves working in. Look for periods of rain and fog to develop across the north, with rain spreading into south central. As we get into Wednesday, nice weather and warm weather continues for south and east. Low pressure continues for the southern Bering Sea at 1,002 millibars. A front moves into south central, picking up the rainfall as we go into Wednesday and Thursday. The front across the north drops a little bit further south toward the Yukon, and as we get into Thursday, a sign of a Siberian cold front, the first of the season, drops toward the northwest coast. That could bring some snow to the Brooks Range and also some high surf and higher seas to many in Kotzebue Sound and the Chukchi coast as we go ahead through the remainder of the week and into the weekend before that subsides. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather. Make sure you check out the very latest weather information at weather.gov.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.